Hello and welcome to another video by Rick Miracle, made in my series Freemasonry and Satanism. The story just gets more bizarre as I go. What in the world is going on? This should be an interesting video. The secret science behind miracles. Unveiling the Huna tradition in the ancient Polynesians, Max Freedom Long. The secret science behind miracles. The secret science behind the occult. The secret science behind magic, sorcery, Kabbalah, mysticism, the other world, the invisible reality. What are we as human beings? Do we have one soul, or are we part of two souls? Or are we part of three souls, called the Trinity? What are poltergeists, ghosts, demons, angels? What about all that information that's coming through channelers, Jane Roberts, Esther Hicks, Lee Carroll, Edgar Casey, and the other people I've been going over, Ernest Norman in the Pulse of Creation series, even David Wilcock. I got a book by him that he thinks he's Edgar Casey and had psychic experiences since he was young. Nikolai Tesla having psychic experiences since he was young. And so many other famous people throughout history seemingly had psychic experiences when they were young. And to some degree, we're all psychic. We're all spiritual beings in these biological bodies. But the question is, with the New Age and the New World Order, what are we? What are the forces working against us, as we've seen with World War I, World War II, Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike, Scottish Rite of Freemasonry leader, Rosicrucians, Communist, Zionist, secret societies, thousands of organizations. What is reality? And I've been going through great lengths to try to figure it out up here. What about the Book of Enoch? Who was Enoch? I made some videos on this. Go watch the videos or look up other people's material or go buy the book. Series 116. What does it have to do with the Jewish utopia, Zionism, the Illuminati, who have a firm control, a grip on the world behind this New Age and New World Order, Hollywood, the porn industry, controlling natural resources and money and wealth all over the world? Here's an interesting book I found. The Jewish History Atlas. I was looking at it, preparing for this video. The whole world, and a little synopsis about the Jewish people searching for safety between 1933 and 1945. 1945 was about the end of World War II. Interestingly enough, World War II, as we all know it, didn't start till 39 or 40. But then in 1933, Jewish people in New York and many other elites all over the world were reading a popular book, Germany Must Perish, calling for the complete annihilation of every German citizen on the planet, their DNA, So I just thought I'd look at a couple of these pages here. From 1933 to 1945. Looks like over here in China and Eastern Russia, the closed to European refugees. Over here in Norway, where my finger is, the 1943 U.S. State Department rejects Swedish proposal for joint rescue of 20,000 Jewish children from Germany. 1940 U.S. Congress rejects bill to open Alaska to Jewish refugees. 1941 U.S. tightens quota system. Congress rejects proposal to admit 20,000 German Jewish children above the quota limits. Mexico, 1937, severe restrictions introduced. May 1939, Cuban and U.S. government refuse to admit 900 German Jewish refugees on the St. Louis. They return to Europe. Looks like Peru, 1939-1945, Jewish immigration limited to 300 a year. 1943, secret Anglo-American conference fails to reach agreement on the possibility of an open-door policy for refugees. This is during World War II. And what else here? 1933 to 1935, unrestricted immigration. Then almost no Jews allowed in 1936 to 1945. In Angola, January 1939, Angola Americans' suggestion that Jewish refugees go to Angola, not followed up for fear of offending the Portuguese. 1943, British government rejects the appeal by the Archbishop of Canterbury to abandon the quota system. Very interesting page here. The dark colors are under German occupation or control of December 1941, home to 8 million Jews. That would be above my finger on the German section, the black area. Then over here, countries almost entirely closed to Jewish refugees. That would be the dark-lined countries like Alaska, Mexico, Chile, parts of all of India, Alaska, the dark shaded area, all of Alaska, India, all the dark shaded area was off, restricted, closed to Jewish refugees. Then the light shaded areas, countries restricting Jewish immigration by means of quota system. So the United States and Brazil, Australia, South Africa, Jewish immigration by means of quota systems or other barriers. Look at the straight lines on the United States and Brazil and then the rest of the world. South Africa, Australia. Countries partially but not entirely restricting Jewish immigrations have the dark highlight around them, like the United States and Ireland and England. Countries partially but not entirely restricting Jewish immigration. So look at the United States and England and Ireland. Has a dark line around the country. England and Ireland, dark line around the country. So I'm saying the Jewish people have played an important role throughout history, finding difficulties wherever they went. Why? And I know in the Encyclopedia Judaica, I've made quite a few videos on that material, in the history of the Jewish people for the past few thousand years, couple thousand years, 2,500 years. Part of their culture was the Kabbalah, mysticism, the Zohar, which seems to be some kind of cult. Call it a religion if you want to call witchcraft a religion, because many times the Jewish people who were into the Kabbalah were accused of sorcery. This isn't anti-Semitism or anything. This is just fact. Stuff you can read in the Encyclopedia Judaica and get books like this. And apparently it's the Jewish people, not all Jewish people, of course. Some people are still of following the Old Testament or the Torah and God's 10 Commandments. But a lot of them, Jewish people, turned away from that and with the Talmud, Zohar, Kabbalah, and other books, mysticism, and appear to be behind the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and a lot of the other secret societies, again, into some kind of cult activity, some kind of mystery religion. It's called a cult, which means secret. So when I talk about the occult, magic, secrets, secret societies, symbols all over the United States of dragons and obelisk in our city squares, those pointy things, the phallic symbol, the all-seeing eye on the US $1 bill, the pyramid, satanic rituals all over the world lately, the archway of Baal to the devil, this archway they wanted to build, you walk under an archway, in New York and London, and later on through UNESCO, the United Nations, I found out that we're trying to put 1,000 of these things all over the world. Portals to the devil. That should make one wonder, what are we talking about with this occult? This theology, Luciferic, satanic, whatever, religion, magic, witchcraft, sacrificing people. Enoch describes God's world. Watchers, archons, angels, Nephilim, beings who disobeyed God, cast out angels, found the humans on earth fair and had sex with them, and produced offspring that were not human and not angels, giants, and other kinds of monsters and beasts. These beings from the other side. What are they? Circle of intrigue. Look at the symbols on this thing. This new age, new world order. This is Tex Mars' book. Got to make a video on that. Cloaked in mystery and shrouded in secrecy, 10 ruthless men comprise the inner circle of the Illuminati conspiracy. What are we talking about? So I have a stack of books here. I'm just going to look at the covers and speak briefly to try to make sense of when I go over this book, what people think and the supporting evidence. Letters on Occult Meditation. You can watch my videos. Many of these I've already made videos on. This is series number 19. Put little numbers on the back. Alice Bailey took over the helm of the Theophist Society that Helena Blavatsky created, which created the Lucifer Publishing Company, later called Lucas Publishing Company. And Lucas means light, and Lucifer's known as the light bearer, and they also published Lucifer magazines, and much more, many of these New Age books. Look at the pyramid here by my finger. I've been going over Edgar Cayce, going into trances, telling people about their history and in Jesus' time, in Atlantis' time, in Egypt's time, Lemuria, etc. What is real? What is this other world? What should we know? Series 113. Jesus Christ in the Talmud, Midrash, and Zohar. I've been making videos on that. Series 113. You won't believe it. Go watch my videos. Series 113. I've done a lot of homework here. The Dead Sea Scrolls. What do those old scrolls say? I made videos on that. Series number 114. I'll be looking at all these books and making another video and another video. How many book reviews do you think this might take? My phone rang. The Encyclopedia of the Occult. The Secrets. I've been reading these books. This is series number 115. I've made videos on material from this. I'll be making more. Going to examine the occult in detail. Mysticism, the Kabbalah, witchcraft, Illuminati, secret societies, Freemasons, Rosicrucians. Here's a book I just discovered. I was visiting a friend and she had this book on the shelf. You're not going to believe this. I'll have to make a video or two on this book. Pole Shift. John White. You know what's fascinating about this book? You're not going to believe it. What will happen during the pole shift? Published. This is what you won't believe. 1980. My finger's right there. 1980. 1980. How many years? 37 years they've been talking about this stuff. You think something's going on? Been reading this book, the Kabbalah. Apparently part of the Jewish culture for since who knows when, 1,000, 2,000 years. Some of the people practicing Kabbalah were accused of sorcery. Sorcery is witchcraft. It's magic. What are they doing? And for 2,000 years and many times in many countries, the Jews were exiled from countries because of accusations of blood libel. Apparently sacrificing a young child or a human being. The Illuminati on YouTube videos. A lot of people tell the inside story, sacrificing people. Germany, Hitler's diary. Apparently they kidnapped a gypsy man in Munich, Germany, sacrificed him on an altar with a young girl laying in the adjacent altar, expecting some being to appear to impregnate the young girl to create some super race, according to Hitler's diary. In Rabbi Marvin Antelman's book, Rabbi Marvin Antelman was the leader of the USA Jewish Congress. No small guy. And he was, I said that material was in Hitler's diary. Well, anyways, the ghost poltergeist being appeared, but failed to impregnate the young girl when they sacrificed the young gypsy man in Munich, Germany during World War II. The occult. What are we talking about? I've been making videos on this book. Major Trends in Jewish Mysticism. 120 series. I have all these supporting documents. Go watch my videos. I'm just trying to point out here. I've done a lot of work. I read this book many times in the past 10 plus years. I haven't made a video on it, but I will right away. The Rosicrucian Philosophy, Questions and Answers. Look at the symbols on the book. Here's a funny one. The cross with the globe with the wings. Look at this symbol here. That's a little weird. Looks like a face with horns, doesn't it? The heart with the light. Lucifer, the light bearer. The cross with these things on the end. Very bizarre. Wait till you see what's in that book. Rosicrucian Enlightenment. I've been reading this one. Masonry Beyond the Light. Always about the light. What is that? This guy was an insider. Look at the star there with the devil's face. He's an ex-witch, the author of this book. William Shanobium. I always say his name wrong. Then joined the Freemasons, and he tells all. It says on the back of this book, to be a Mason, you must first take an oath. That is, in reality, a denial of Jesus Christ. The father of modern Masonry said, Lucifer is God. You getting the point here? And I've made videos on this book, series number 14, Psychic Self-Defense. Why do we need psychic self-defense? Should we be worried about spiritual entities or something? People using witchcraft and magic, voodoo, etc.? Another one. The Rainbow Coalition, the gay agenda, transgender, pansexualism, orgies, all kinds of things, part of satanic cults, if you didn't know that. It's in Rabbi Marvin Entelman's book, To Eliminate the Opaque, Volume 1 and Volume 2, the Frankists and Sabbatans. So there are some beings on the other side that like to be worshipped, and they're the opposite of God and the good angels and whatever beings are in the universe. The hidden dangers of the rainbow. All this new culture, all this new teachings. What's it have to do with our reality? Astrology, the space age science. Series 41, the population bomb. Why back, remember we saw that they were doing the pole shift back in 1980? Why back in 1968? The date's right there. 68, almost 1970. 10 years before they were writing books about a pole shift. Why do we have books about a population bomb? People don't want to believe with this global warming, global cooling, climate change, sustainability, biodiversity, this vicious control for the world's resources and the ever-expanding country of Israel, even with the 911 event, creating maps. You can find them on Yahoo image sites of a greater Israel. I've shown the maps. And all of that land and all of the Middle East, and apparently the entire world, will be controlled from Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. But they have to control our minds and change the way we think and what we think. So they make these books, TV programmings, documentaries. People don't know what to believe anymore. And you can't blame them. The Book of the Law, series number 23, Aleister Crowley. He tells all in this book. He was communicating with Lamb and Aiwass, entities. He drew pictures of what they look like. They look like gray aliens. A lot of people who were abducted by aliens drew pictures or told what they look like. They look like gray aliens. Technique of the Master, series number 87. I made a couple videos on this, where they recruit people to be initiates in the Freemasons, in the Rosicrucians, in the Illuminati. And all of these organizations beware of the rainbow. Tens of thousands of these or more organizations all over the world, secret societies, who have to swear on some Bible under threat of death not to divulge the secrets. Just two more books here. Forbidden Science. What should we know about this UFO alien thing? Look how thick this book is. There's no shortage of this material. And even like the all-seeing eye and the pyramid from, we know in Egypt there's pyramids. And all these hieroglyphics seem to have some connection to Egypt and ancient times. The symbols are out there. I've been going over the books. Even Washington, D.C., the street plan is like a giant owl on the front of the $1 bill. Right above my finger, perched on top of that one, right there, you can see it. There's a little tiny owl, Moloch. At least we not forget the eye, the light behind the eye. We keep talking about the light, the pyramid, and so many other symbols. So I think now that I've had that opening, you'll probably find what's in this book fascinating as I delve deeper into the occult and the secret science behind miracles. I realize that was quite an opening. When I read from this book, I've been reading this book for a few days. I'm going to start out with one chapter called Two Souls of Man and the Proof that there are two instead of one. So what do you know about the human soul? What is the truth? And what's interesting with me doing all this research, when I listen to the channelers channeling entities from the other side, like Esther Hicks channeling Abraham, Jane Roberts channeling Seth, Lee Carroll channeling Cryon, or the Ra material, or Ernest Norman in the Pulse of Creation series, David Wilcock material, and so much more. My knowledge bank enables me to hear it, what they're saying, and understand a little bit, which is the whole point of all the videos that I've made. It's such a vast topic. You have to take your time and watch some videos and about numerous other topics, because I believe it's just one reality that we all live in, we humans, and apparently it's populated by other types of beings, and apparently there are other realities, and apparently we created humans are from the other reality. We're actually spiritual beings in these biological bodies. So it's twofold or more, but at least twofold. One, my research is involved with examining this reality and examining the other reality. And listening to people like Edgar Cayce, Nikola Tesla. He said he wasn't such a genius. He was having visions, hearing voices, being instructed. And I found out that's quite common throughout history. So, is there more to we people, we humans, than as simple as one soul? Do we have silver cords at the top of our head that connect us to some higher power, higher force, God, if you will? And I guess if some people are praying to Lucifer or Satan, would they be connected to demonic beings? But what about our souls that are here in this body? Is there just one or is there two? And even in the Bible, Jesus Christ was casting out unclean spirit. What is an unclean spirit? And casting out demons. What is a demon? Why does it make a man insane, mentally crazy when he's possessed? And once you exorcise that man or woman, they become normal again. This other entity takes over, creates some kind of hysteria. Remote viewing by the government. I've been making videos on those guys. Tim Rifat, David Morehouse. I'll continue looking at that stuff. Alright, so let me read a little bit from this book. The Secret Science Behind Miracles. From the Huna. The Kahuna from Hawaii. The Huna material. Huna traditions. Ancient Polynesians. What's the story? How did those people get to Hawaii? Where did they come from? It's in this book. Fascinating story. One of the most intriguing and radically different elements in the system of psychology used by the kahunas, the shamas, the magical priest over there in Hawaii, must be introduced at this point in the report in order to continue the presentation of the vastly important subject of vital force. Now remember, I've read a lot of material from this book, so I'll add my 2 cents to try to speed up anybody's knowledge who's watching my videos. I like to think I can speak in plain English, and if you can last for an hour or so watching my stuff, you're probably going to come away with something. And if you really want to find out stuff, get yourself a notepad like I do here, reading about some of the material in this book, The Secret Science Behind Miracles. I take notes from everything I read, videos I watch. Got many of these notebooks full of material. So it just helps me learn, remember, and then when I make videos, I read it again. When I talk about it, I discuss it again. You can't help but learn and get a picture of reality, whether it's this manifested earth reality or the heaven-like or Hades-like spiritual reality. And I have many books on UFOs and aliens, probably 200. We'll be looking at those and seeing how they connect with these dots. Connecting the dots everywhere, showing how everything is connected. And it is, from my observation. All right. So, vastly important subject of the vital force. What is the vital force? And the accompanying magnetism. Dr. Brigham was able to learn more about the magical methods used in the death prayer. Now you see why I went through such an opening? This magic includes something called a death prayer. How does that work? In Hawaii, than any other kahuna practice. So Dr. Brigham had spent 40 years of his life. Like I said, I've been reading this, and I'm up to page 81. I've read all these other pages here. I'm just going to reference them for snapshots for this video. I'm sure I'll be making more than one video out of this book. Are you kidding? In a moment, I will present a case from his experience. So this Dr. Brigham was in Hawaii for 40 years studying the magic of the kahunas. But first, we shall have some general notes. The kahunas had a number of beliefs which they did not keep secret. For instance, they shared with the common people their knowledge of the fact that man had 2 souls or spirits instead of 1. So how does that work? The early missionaries thought this a most droll and idiotic concept, worthy of only heathen and savages. Where do you find out where the Hawaiians came from? Apparently, they could remote view. They had psychic ability. The kahuna over there in North Africa, next to the Nile River, next to the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx is where they came from. But anyways, they saw there were disturbances in the world, so they wanted to find a different place to live. Isn't that interesting where they're from? The people from Hawaii. And so the priest, shama, kahuna, whatever you want to call him, would go in a trance, and they do this today, and he would travel around the planet. And he found the Hawaiian Islands. And they built a bunch of double canoes, 2 canoes tied together with a pole in between, numerous poles, so they could survive being in the ocean. And apparently they had magical skills, magic, and they could even control what they called wind spirits. I know it's hard to fathom. So when they did make it to Hawaii and they formed their society and their kahuna religions, a lot of the words match the words over there in North Africa near the Nile River in that area. And we all know about the Anunnaki and the ancient civilization of the Egypts and the monuments. Like I said, it's connecting the dots. So apparently there were 11 of 12 tribes that made it to Hawaii. And even in North Africa today, they still practice firewalking like they do in Hawaii. And so much more. Like I said, I've been reading this book. Published when? Copyright 1948. And this updated edition was 1976. And the Mr. Brigham had been researching the kahunas for 40 years when this school teacher who went to Hawaii from California and kept hearing about the magic of the kahunas and all kinds of rumors which were strenuously denied. And he pursued it, and if he was probably like me, the more elusive it was, the more he pursued it. And finally he got to the point where he heard about this Dr. Brigham, who said that he'd been looking for a young man to pass all this knowledge on. And then this man, Max Freedom Long, the author of this book, took over the research for his lifetime. And here I am sharing it with people who watch my video. And this is series number 138. And I'm got about 350 videos on YouTube, almost 500 hours, if not more than 500 hours, pursuing WTH, as I like to call it. What the heck is going on planet Earth? What is with this New Age, New World Order, planned World War III, FEMA camps, microchipping people, biblical prophecies, disarming Americans in the world, the relentless annihilation of the towns and cities in Syria after ravaging all of the Middle East since 9/11? It's all connected. So here they have something called a death prayer. And so the kahunas shared the fact that we have more than one soul. And of course the early Christian ministries that went to Hawaii thought that was all idiotic, droll, and only worthy of heathen and savages. Well, today they're finding out that maybe this psychic stuff is all real. Even the government trains remote viewers to leave their body and spy on other people. So there's an interesting question. If the soul leaves the body to go spy on the Russians or whatever, and the body is still alive, who's taking care of the body while the other soul is gone? So what are these souls and what do they do and how do we use them? Well, I'll be getting to that. This ought to be an interesting video. And the ones I have to make in the future. And the ones I've been making in the past. The past 20 videos since I got the Encyclopedia Judaica on Zionism, on the Kabbalah, on the Jewish people history, on anti-Semitism, on all these books, Zohar. To them, the early Christians who went to Hawaii, man had but one soul, and their job was to save it if possible. As they arrived in Hawaii in 1820, and the subconscious was not discovered by Freud until over half a century later, they can hardly be blamed for laughing at the kahuna beliefs. The kahunas went a step further than modern psychology had gone. Remember, these people are the descendants of the people from Egypt, where the pyramids are. Wow. Related maybe to the ancient Atlanteans, Lemurians. You know, there's a lot of these stories, even with the Hopis in the Midwest, different Indian tribes, the Mayans, Aborigines in Australia. They seem to have similarities in stories all over the world. So if you've been reading all this or watching my videos or other people's videos, you start to pick up on this link. All right, so the kahunas thought we had two souls and they had a philosophy. And the rest of the world thought we had one until Dr. Freud discovered the soul, the subconscious, the conscience. The kahunas knew that the subconscious, as we call it, was one spirit, and the conscious mind another spirit. They dwelt together in the body, each soul, or spirit, or self, or psyche. Call it what you will, performing its part in the general task of living and thinking. And according to science that's well known today, we have two halves of the brain, the left brain, and this is the right brain and the left brain. And apparently the left brain operates at a slow frequency. Call that a wavelength from here to here. But the right brain operates at an infinitely higher frequency, and it has all these little wavelengths from here to here. Just making my point. So this one, the right brain, operates at a super high frequency rate. This one operates at a frequency rate like a guy speaking into a microphone at a local jazz club and you listening. That would be this frequency. This one would be the frequencies probably even greater than some of the super computers that we all take for granted today, whether it's our iPhones or laptop computers, which can connect to the internet and wireless and give us movies like what you're watching. Two different speeds of operation from the two different halves of your total brain, which is like two different brains. So apparently, if there is two spirits in us, one spirit is the conscience of me talking and looking right now, and the other one is a much higher frequency which controls my actions and everything else through emotions. And when I dream, it seems to connect to some other reality, and people who are psychic and can remote view, that portion of your soul can even go to Russia, to the moon, anywhere, in an instant. That's two. Apparently, there's a third. Through the silver cord on the top of our head, we're connected to the divine spirit, the God world, if you will. So that's three. This book will explain a little bit about those. So once you get this stuff in your head, and we try to put the New Age and New World Order material together, it's a tedious task. But if you take one little step, one baby step at a time, you start to see the whole picture. There's no way around, and you can't skip any steps. So the kahunas knew that the subconscious, as we call it, was one spirit, and the conscious mind, another. They dwell together in the body, each soul, or spirit, or self, or psyche, whatever you want to call it, performing its part in the general task of living and thinking. Each of our two spirits has its own mental abilities. So the left brain does particular task, and the right brain does particular task. And apparently, when you pray, the right brain, praying is done with the conscious mind, the slow one. The subconscious might be much higher. Whatever. One of them communicates with the other world. I want to get this backwards. So when you pray, you start to communicate with the higher self, or the conscious self, or the subconscious self. It's three parts to us, according to this material and much other material, that if you think about that, a lot of things might make more sense. Each of our two spirits has its own mental abilities. The subconscious, Upahali, it's a Hawaiian word, can remember but has only elementary reasoning powers, such as a dog or horse may have. So our subconscious has a lesser awareness of reasoning, but a infinite ability for storage. Isn't that interesting? Like a hard disk drive. So your lower self is in charge of storing information, not reasoning like driving a car down the street, but it does store in all the images and everything you say and do. It catalogs them and stores them 24/7. On the other hand, the conscience, called Yuhain, cannot remember a thought once it has let go out of the center of attention. And we've all woken up from having a dream, and if we don't write it down or talk about it right away, 2 minutes later we're like, what was that? And you can't remember a thing. That's the conscious mind. That's why when you're thinking and you try to just keep focused on one topic or one thought, generally speaking, you can't do it. Try it. And that's part of what the people who get initiated or get into the secret societies, they learn how to focus on one thought or no thoughts to allow a different portion of their consciousness to communicate with the higher world and control elements around us where they get magic abilities. It's in this book. So it has to depend on the subconscious to give back any thought needed as memory. So if you feel like you can't remember somebody's name or something, and you're saying to yourself, I can't remember that. But you give yourself instructions to remember 2 or 3 minutes or an hour later or the next day, you go, puff, wow, there's that thought, there's that name. So the two different spirit entities inside of us, they function differently, have different operational duties. And then, of course, you got the third one, which is the one that's in the heavens in the other dimension that we're connected to. So we have one that's animal-like, and apparently that's a young soul that hasn't been around very long and acts more like a soul of an animal. Now we have another soul in us that's part of our reincarnated self that's been around a while and is much more intelligent and aware. So it takes two souls to run this human body. Spirits, whatever you want to call them, according to this material. And if you want to understand magic, I think it's a good place to start listening to the material and not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing, but just give it a chance and think about it. Sometimes the subconscious cannot find the right memory when it is desired. Often it must be given time to make the search. We have all had the experience of being unable to remember a name, and then for some time later, having a name suddenly come to us. The conscious mind has two powers which are its very own. One is the power to use the will of a hypnotic kind, more potent than the elementary will of the subconscious mind. The second power is that of using the highest known form of reason, the inductive, which sets man apart as a superior animal in the animal kingdom. So our conscious mind even has the power to mesmerize, and I suspect much greater abilities, but that's been erased from human history intentionally by the ancient powers that be. Like even in the early Christian church, they burned the Library of Alexandria just to get rid of all that ancient knowledge. And throughout history, whenever they went into a new country where there were shamans or priests, they immediately confiscated all that secret knowledge, killed the shamans and priests and banned them, burned all the religious artifacts. And why did they do that? The subconscious accepts and reacts to hypnotic suggestion or mesmeric treatment. The conscious mind cannot be hypnotized. So when you get hypnotized, it isn't your conscious mind that's hypnotized. They're hypnotizing your subconscious self. Like an animal. And it can be told, you've seen it on TV programs or whatever. People told to act like a chicken or a monkey. Under the influence of suggestion, the subconscious, being illogical to a large degree, will accept and react to even absurd suggestions. In the theater, performances based on hypnotic demonstrations, people can be made to believe most absurd facts about themselves and thus amuse the audience. Now remember, this chapter is about the death prayer. Continuing on, there is a logical reason for including the secret science behind miracles in my series, Freemasonry and Satanism. With all the odd things going on in the world, in particular the satanic type rituals and accusations, spirit cooking Pizzagate, and so much more. Shiva on the Empire State Building, a gigantic goat projected on the Hoover Dam, the owl Moloch that one reporter showed on TV during the Boston bombing, the owl-shaped street plan in Washington, D.C., the little owl perched on the $1 sign on the front of the $1 bill. What is the occult? What is the Kabbalah? And the Kabbalists historically have been accused of sorcery. That's witchcraft. So what's real? Continuing on the book here, page 83. The secret science behind miracles. Not Rick Miracle. All right. Data on the use of vital force in the Kahuna death prayer as related to the belief that man has two spirits, the subconscious and the conscience. And apparently, a third component connecting us to the God spirit, if you will. So that would be 3. So here's some preliminary notes. During my years in Hawaii, the stage play The Bird of Paradise was advertising Hawaii, its volcano, and the kahunas with their death prayer. So when you go to Hawaii, they have a big luau, the barbecue a pig and a big party. Well, they have kind of shows and dances like the American Indians do. But this particular show is the kahunas doing the death prayer. All right. So they were advertising the death prayer ceremonies in Hawaii throughout the civilized world. Hardly a tourist arrived in Honolulu who had not seen the play and learned of the deadly use of magic by the native priest. You can't make this stuff up. One of the questions most frequently asked by visitors concerning the variety of the death prayer usually they were told that there was nothing to it. So most of the tourists asked about the death prayer. And I remember when I was down in the Yucatan, Mexico, and I went to Tulum, the old ruins with the pyramids, and they did the same thing about sacrificing people. The guide who was taking us through the Tulum ruins was even asked by some of the tourists about the ancient ritual of sacrificing people. And of course the guide, a Mayan, said, "Oh, we don't do that anymore." What to believe? Although I have to say, in Mexico, the Mayans and the people in the Yucatan were really nice people. But what do some cults do in secret? We don't know. That's why I make all these videos and I investigate all the stuff I do. Go watch some people on YouTube videos talking about escaping witch covens, that's a group of witches, an organization, or Masonic lodges and temples when they learn too much, or the Illuminati people who tell about the insiders, whistleblowers, and so much more. I've gone over many books on these topics, and I'll be going over many more. Whatever it takes to wake us all up. Or they might be treated to wild tales of death through this form of magic. And remember, like in Haiti and places like that, they have voodoo. And I know a little bit about this stuff. I've been studying psychic research for years. I'm familiar on how the pendulum works to find water and minerals and lost people, even by the forest rangers. You can look this stuff up. The U.S. Army was training troops in Vietnam using pendulums to find the underground caves for Vietnamese people, the military, and the weapons. Telephone companies use, if you talk to the guy with the telephone truck or the electric truck, you might see him walking across the field with a stick or something looking for underground wires using a device like this. Plenty of information out there to prove this. The truth was that over a period of several years during which I checked the data, through doctors frequenting the Queen's Hospital in Honolulu, not a year passed, but one or more victims of the potent magic died, despite all the hospital could do to try to aid the victim. And the old-time doctors had recognized the familiar symptoms year after year. There were several kinds of kahunas in Hawaii before they ceased almost entirely to understand the ancient lore. Some were hardly more than spiritualistic mediums. Isn't that interesting? We talk about channeled material by channelers who are called psychics and mediums, and you also have the kahunas who were practicing healing, and even I guess if you paid them and somebody was bad and you could convince them, they would do the death prayer to have that person die. We're called spiritualistic mediums. Some were prophets, so some of the kahunas could prophesize your future. Some labored to control the wind and the weather. A few were able to perform almost any part of the magic, be it healing or controlling the elements. Among the specialists were kahunas who might have several magical abilities, but who also could use the death prayer. The ability to use the death prayer was based on a mechanism so strange and to us so fantastic and incredible that it stretches the imagination to grasp it before we understand the full details of the kahuna lore. As I have explained, the kahunas believed that man had two spirits, the lower or subconscious, one being illogical and subject to the influence of hypnotic suggestion. To become able to use the death prayer, a kahuna had to inherit from another kahuna one or more ghostly subconscious spirits. Or he might, if sufficiently psychic, locate subconscious spirits or ghosts and use hypnotic suggestion to capture and enslave them. Think about that with the ancient accusations of blood libel against the Jews across the Middle East and Europe. Why were they sacrificing a little boy, draining all the blood, drinking it? Apparently, and of course witchcraft and the Illuminati and the Mayans and elsewhere all over the world, and apparently here even in Hawaii, apparently if they sacrifice somebody, they can capture the spirit, enslave it, and have it work for them. Even King Solomon apparently had a magic six-pointed ring who could control or call forth demons. So are enslaved spirits also demons? In very early Hawaii, prisoners of war or other unfortunates were sometimes given what apparently was hypnotic suggestion in a potent form to cause their subconscious spirit after death to separate itself from its conscious mind spirit and remain as a ghost to serve as guard at sacred stone enclosures and native temples of the degraded form of kahunaism. It is probable that some of these unfortunates were given orders to serve the kahunas in the death prayer magic after they were executed. So they could control these lower form spirits after they executed somebody and use them for the death prayer. In any event, the kahunas in question had one or more, usually about 3, of these enslaved ghostly subconscious spirits. When a person was to be prayed to death for any of many reasons, the kahuna called to him his enslaved spirits and gave them mesmeric orders to absorb mana from food and drink placed on a mat on the ground, and surrounded the ceremonial objects with the small white stones and certain pieces of wood. So when they called forth the spirits, they would put food and drink on the ground. Why does that remind me of ancient legends about leaving food and drink at temples to gods? Stuff you learn. Again, I ask, what is our reality? This mana was vital force, such as we have been discussing. It is undoubtedly transferred from the body of the kahuna into the food, drink, and ceremonial objects, which were called the papa or forbidden. And I am aware, as I've been studying this stuff for years, trying to figure out a little bit about it, because apparently these secret societies all over the world, whether it's a Freemasonic Lodge, the Rosicrucian, witchcraft covens, Illuminati, Zionists, communists, people studying the Zohar, mysticism, and so much more, I thought it might behoove the rest of us to become a little bit aware of this stuff. But I'm aware if you take a stone like this, a crystal, or like this, crystals, or like this, crystals, and you set them in the windowsill, they will charge up. You can charge this up with energy by setting it in the sun. And for some people who do healing, they take a charged stone and maybe put it up to a person to discharge that charged energy like a battery. Someplace on your body for different ailments, or they make amulets, breastplates with the different colored crystals for different frequencies and different energies. Just FYI. Stuff I remember from my research. I've got books on all this stuff. I was doing the psychic research for years until I got into the conspiracy going on, the New Age and the New World Order. I don't want to call it a conspiracy theory because I think most of us can see now that there is something going on. And they say them even now. But they're trying to convince the people that they're the part of the problem. They caused global warming. They caused pollution in the water. They're causing everything. Sustainability, biodiversity. Somebody's trying to change the thinking. And I'm just asking, is it for the better or worse? With all the satanic symbolism and TV programs and shows and wars and murder and economic destruction, fake false flag terror events, fake news, spirit cooking, Pizzagate, child abduction, porn, and so much more. I'd say the people in charge of our planet right now are not looking out for our benefit, physically or spiritually. And they do want to destroy Christianity and get people to believe that Jesus was just a myth. Makes you wonder how people can be so deceived. It was through that when the manna was taken from the food and drink, some of the substances were also taken, especially alcohol from gin, set as the papa forbidden in later days. Recall Baron Ferson's experience with the transfer of intoxication from a drunk person to himself. So we all have energy, we all have auric fields, and they have different colors according to my research, and much other material out there research. For about 200 years now, psychic research. But the public's not really made aware of most of this. So anyways, we can be charged up with energy, or we can be drained of energy, especially with the toxins and pollutions in food and drink. And they can cause us to be diseased, which means dis-ease, disease. And apparently you can go out into the wilderness and chant, let's say next to a forest or a running waterway, a big creek. And you can hold your hand out, and if you use your mind correctly, you can draw energy from the forested area and the water and charge yourself up. That's what the people who practice the occult do. And I believe that's why they sacrifice people. They're sucking the spiritual energy, the plasma from that person at the moment of death, or the vibration of fear with the blood libel accusations where they do not want the little boy to die quickly, and they want him to be in extreme pain, releasing, of course, different frequencies of fear and hormones into the blood. I know it's a distasteful conversation, but hey, that's what I've been learning. The spirits were also given very definite instructions as to what they were to do with the force. So they would call forth these imprisoned, enslaved spirits, put the food and water out, tell the enslaved spirit to draw from it energy, and then they were to tell that energized spirit what to do with the force. They were to catch the scent from a bit of hair or soiled garment belonging to the intended victim, just like they do with finding people with a psychic. You got to have some of the hair from a hairbrush or clothing or something to give you the frequency. Then you can find a person by looking at a map, but you need the person's frequency, some of their essence. So apparently when they sick a killer spirit on somebody, they need some of that scent, that essence also. And follow it very much as a dog does a track, like I just said. Upon reaching the victim, they were to await their chance to enter his or her body. Now we're talking about possession. Jesus exorcised people, got possessed entities out of people, or unclean spirits, he called them. And if they were acting seriously mentally ill or even physically ill, after the spiritual entity was removed, the person would appear normal. It's in the Bible and in a lot of other historical documents. And apparently it's on the increase. Some college girls, I think in Ohio, and you can look this up on your computer, became possessed, a whole group of them, playing with a Ouija board, communicating with other beings. They voluntarily, I guess, opened up their bodies to these beings and became possessed. An ambulance had to be called, and they were put in straitjackets and taken away. I kid you not, look up this stuff. Don't believe a thing I say. I read the books, pay attention to what's going on in the world, and I report. Upon reaching the victim, they were to await their chance to enter his or her body. This they were able to do because of the power to use as a paralyzing shock. Remember, they charged up with the food and drink. And apparently, if you're charged up, even as a ghost, and you touch somebody, you can give them a jolt or paralyze and shock like a stun gun. It's in this book. I've been reading quite a bit. I can't read all this book, so I can just tell you what I read. It's all highlighted. I'll be doing more videos on this stuff and this book. Paralyzing shock, the surcharge of vital force given to them by their master with the food and drink. Now, when in seances, when a medium holds hands with 3 or 4 people, 5 people, in the 1800s they were doing this a lot, seances, and she would go into a trance, holding hands with everybody, and maybe in the midst of the table or above would appear a ghost-like person that they were calling from the dead. And they would communicate during the seance. There's plenty of books on this. I've got the books. I've made videos on them. I'll make more on them. Anyways, when the seance was over and the entity left and the medium in a trance slumped over because her energy was drawn. This spirit being was drawing the vital energy from the medium herself or himself. Interestingly enough, also all over the table, or sometimes on the arm or the people, would be some gooey substance called ecoplasm. So when the spiritual being drew it from the people there or the medium to materialize his physical appearance, when he disappeared, this gooey stuff dropped. He had to wipe it off. And it was the ecoplasm from the people themselves where the spiritual entity drew the material so he could be visible. All right. Well, apparently there is a prayer here. I'll just read part of it. I don't want to do evil prayers. The order which the spirits were trained to obey was recorded in one case. O Spirit, listen to my voice. This is the plan. And then he would say, rush upon, and then he would say the person's name. Remember, he gave the spirits some scent. And enter. Enter and curl up. Curl up and straighten out. So they were to possess the person they intended to kill. The curl up and straighten out had other meanings that we give the words in English. So they used some kind of Hawaiian words, magic words, for curl up and straighten out. The process was one of entering the body of the intended victim and attaching themselves to it. That done, the vital force of the victim was taken by the intruding spirits and stored in their ghostly bodies, of which we have much to say in due times. So they were actually taking in the vital force from the possessed person, just like they were taking the vital force from the food and drink that was put out before them to charge them up. As the vital forces of the victim were withdrawn from the feet, a numbness came to them which rose gradually over a period of 3 days, to the knees, hips, and finally to the solar plexus or heart, at which time the victim died. So you would get a tingling sensation in your feet like they were asleep, paralyzed, and it would slowly creep up your legs over 3 days to your knee and your thigh and right up into your heart. Everything would become slowly paralyzed. By that time, you were probably at the hospital, somebody called. And the doctors at the hospital in Hawaii recognized it for what it was. It's in this book, the death prayer. So it had recognizable symptoms that they've seen for many years. When the death had been accomplished, the spirits left the body, taking with them their great charges of vital force, and returned to their masters. If the victim had been rescued by another kahuna, and the spirits sent back by him to their owner with hypnotic orders to attack their master, they might make such an attack with fatal results. So if another kahuna got involved, he would again hypnotize these attacking spirits in the body and tell them to go back to the kahuna who sent them and to attack him. That's in this book described very clearly. In order to avoid such a danger, a magic ritual of cleansing was usually performed by the kahuna sending out the spirits. Or, as was most often the case, the person who had hired the kahuna to send the death prayer to another, and who had vouched for the fact that the intended victim deserved such drastic punishment, would be named as the one responsible to be attacked should another kahuna send the spirit back before their task was accomplished. So if somebody paid a kahuna to do it, and they had the person in the hospital, and they asked him a couple questions, is there somebody that really is angry with you, who would like to see you dead? And they go, yeah, this person. And this person probably hired the kahuna that could send those spirits to that person. In the event of a return from a successful mission, the kahunas ordered his spirit slaves to play until they used up all the vital force they had taken in the process of killing the guilty one. Their play usually took the form of what we would call poltergeist activities. We've all seen the Ghostbuster movies. So apparently if they were overcharged, rather going back into the sacred temple or enclosure where they were kept, they had to be discharged. So the kahuna would tell them to play, and that would involve flying all around, knocking things around, rustling trees, making the wind blow, whatever these spiritual ghosts do. Where do you think they got all the information to make these movies? On so many issues, even like Hunger Games. That's part of the New Age and the New World Order. Part of the programming for We the People with the rainbow agenda, pansexualism, transgenderism, and all this other stuff, gay marriage, they got movies like Modern Family. And to get people to get away from family values and morality, they brought us Seinfeld and 2.5 Men, where Jerry or Two and a Half Men, those guys would sleep with a different Charlie, with a different girl in every show, even several girls. So it was a kind of a programming going on, and it's still going on, of course. Even more so right now. Just saying this because people need to be aware we are being manipulated. And I think a lot of it is with these secret cults and societies and evil forces, which is in the Bible and in this channeled material I've been going over. Even that Uranta book talked about the satanic and Luciferic and other entities, evil forces that needed to be dealt with on this planet. And I'll be continuing to go over channeled material and more other material supporting these things that appear to be the answers to many questions. What's going on? They would move and throw objects, make loud noises, and create a belam of some proportions. Dr. Brigham once heard a great commotion in a hut of a kahuna at night, and was later told the spirits were at play in this manner. Wow. So the kahuna, let's call him a witch, and not all kahunas were evil, could call forth the spirits in his hut and cause a lot of ruckus. None of the usual explanations of the death prayer, such as the use of the mysterious poison or of dying of superstitious fear, were true. Almost never did the victim know that he was about to be killed by magic. To illustrate this, let me tell of 2 cases in which the fear element could play no part. So now we have another case here about using the death prayer. A young Irishman came to Honolulu with the first of the modern taxicabs. He was rough and ready. His hair was red, and he was afraid of nothing. Before he had been long in the city, he was contrived to get a fine Hawaiian girl so much in love with him that she broke off her engagement to a Hawaiian boy. The girl's grandmother did her best to break up the new affair, seeing as she did that the Irishman had no good intentions. So she saw that the Irishman had no good intentions. She even went so far as to make veiled threats that heaven would punish him if he did not leave the girl alone. Very naturally, the Irishman had no fear of heaven. He was very much of the scientific attitude and probably quite accustomed to the futile threats of angry mothers and grandmothers. It is certain that such threats could not have left the least effect on him, so he wasn't worried about the threats. One day his feet went to sleep. He did his best to right matters by pricking numbness, but the prickling numbness crept slowly upward. Oh boy. He was entered by the spirits. They were eating up his vital force. In the course of a day, he had passed through the hands of 2 doctors and landed in the hospital. Every effort was made to discover the cause of the illness, but no cause was found and no treatment availed. In 50 hours, the prickling had reached his waist. When several doctors had interested themselves in the case, including one of the friends of this author, there came head shakings and grave suspicions. An old doctor who had practiced long on the islands was called in. He recognized the symptoms at once as those of the death prayer. So I'm not going to read line by line here, but anyways, they grilled the guy in the hospital and said, "Somebody trying to kill you?" And he goes, no, I don't know of anybody trying to kill me. And they kept talking to him, and then he mentioned the girl, and he mentioned the threat by the grandmother. So the people figured it out that this older lady knew a kahuna. So they asked him in the hospital, you're being attacked by magic. And if you leave the island, maybe we can call it off. And he laughed at them. And it was getting closer and closer. And finally he believed them. He said, yes, I'll leave the island. So they went to the old lady and said, hey, maybe you could help us. This is going on. The guy promises to leave the island. And the lady says, well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I suspect that if he left the island, it would all go away. So she wasn't admitting to it, but she was saying if he left the island, she could call the kahuna and he could call the spirits back. And when he agreed to that night he was on his feet again and able to catch a Japanese ship for the coast. So I'm going to skip some pages here, go over to another story. All right. I'd like to tell another story in this book. This man, professor, doctor, who was studying the kahunas for 40 years, one of his professions was anthropology, plants, investigation animals on Hawaiian Islands, and writing technical papers. And one of his favorite things to do was to visit one of the active volcanoes. So he had planned a trip, and while he traveled to that particular area, he needed to get manpower, people, and equipment at the foot of the mountain to go up, camp out, do his business, and come back. So anyways, in the town, he had no problem recruiting, say, a dozen people. One of them, a young man, a young boy. So they took off to go check out the lava field, check out the plants, the water, animals, the whole area. And they went past the tree line and ran into the barren area the higher they got up the mountain. But apparently, the young boy got sick. So the doctor, professor, decided to leave him behind and go on the trip and come back, and they would take him to the doctors later. So anyways, while he's on the mountain investigating the different terrain and plants, etc., one of the natives came running back and said, the boy is getting sicker. So the professor was a little annoyed, the doctor, and went back to the encampment and knew they had to go back, but he recognized the signs by the paralysis of the feet and that particular type of problem. And he asked the boy, did somebody threaten him or hate him or want to see him dead? And the boy couldn't think of it, but finally, after enough talk, it was discovered that he had left a more remote village where they had a kahuna, the witch doctor, if you want to call it that for understanding it, who was seriously opposed to white people. And he had threatened anybody in the tribe that if they went and associated with white people, he would do the death prayer. So there wasn't any kahuna at hand for the doctor to help the boy out, and the paralysis was slowly growing up from the feet to the knees and moving up the body and becoming more threatening. So I just didn't want to read 2 pages. I wanted to give you the opening here. So the doctor, now that you know what happened, what they diagnosed as the potential problem, the doctor, while I was thinking things over, and you can believe this stuff or not, but it doesn't seem like this author, from all that I've read, was trying to be deceitful. He has a serious, high qualified reputation. I've got several of his books. Well recognized author. So he's thinking, while I was thinking things over, the old man came to me as a spokesman for the natives and made perfectly a natural suggestion. Now, the natives knew that this doctor was a researcher in his own right, so they suspected he had great powers. He politely called my attention to the fact that all Hawaiians knew that I was a great kahuna and even a firewalker. So this doctor had even walked on fire. Remember, he'd been studying this stuff for 40 years. To him, it seemed simple enough that I should adjust matters by praying the kahuna to death and saving the boy. The men waited expectantly. You can imagine how these natives would be. And I could see in their eyes their confidence that I would turn back the death prayer and that all would be well. On my part, I was cornered. I had bluffed for years, and now my bluff had been called. I was most uncomfortable. If I refused to do the obvious thing, they would be sure that I was afraid of the kahuna and not strong enough as I pretended to be. Now, I've always had considerable pride, said the doctor, and at the thought of showing what might be mistaken for the white feather before my men, I decided there and then to try my hand at sending the death prayer back to the kahuna. So again, 40 years of research, the doctor wasn't ignorant about these matters. It just he'd never practiced witchcraft in this degree. Kahuna, black death, or death prayer magic. This is perhaps the easiest thing an amateur magician can be called upon to do. So apparently it's not all that complicated. The spell had been initiated and the trained spirits had been sent out. All I had to do was put up the usual big arguments to talk the brainless things over to my side and then exert all my will to send them back and make them attack the kahuna. I felt this would be fairly easy as the boy was guilty of no actual sin. So you can imagine now the boy is possessed by these spirits, trained to kill people. Whether you believe that or not, you can do some research and look up possession, read it in the Bible, many other sources, my videos, other people's videos. Apparently, it's a real thing. And so I guess when you're talking to the boy there, and you know some of the incantations, the prayers, the spirits in the boy can hear you. And whenever you're talking or thinking or praying, you're creating thought forms. I've showed books of pictures of thought forms, and I'm going to go over that material again. So you can communicate with the spirits possessing the boy. They can rationalize to some very simple degree. I was a long way from the tie leaves, which are usually brushed over the victim as part of the ceremony that helps drive out spirits, but I have never believed them very necessary. I think on my last video on mysticism by Evelyn Underhill, she awoke, who was that? Saint Teresa awoke with a demon on her chest, which is a spirit that took some protoplasm from Saint Teresa or the air to manifest itself into a physical, visible form, and she sprinkled holy water on him to get rid of him, that demon. So if you study this stuff enough, you start to pick up on some things. And that's why I take the time and the tedious effort to make these videos, so that even if we learn one thing, and I keep making videos for 1 or 2 hours each, at some point you can become a slightly knowledgeable, especially more knowledgeable than the average person who doesn't even bother to inquire. All right. So he knew he had to talk to the spirits, and he needed to convince them of something. All right, and he didn't. Usually they have these Thai leaves, these Hawaiian leaves you brush a person with before you do a healing or a ceremony. But he didn't have them, and he really didn't think they were necessary for the thing he wanted to do. I just realized my lamp was out. So here we go, back to how the doctor handled this case. Moreover, I was angry and impatient. I got up and said to the men, "You all know that I am a powerful kahuna." They agreed most enthusiastically. "Then watch me," I growled. With that, I went over to the boy and set to work. So you can imagine how an older man who had been studying this stuff for 40 years on a Hawaiian island, living in the bush, might behave. The trick of the thing is to put up an argument of such cunning that the spirits will be made to think that their master must be a devil to send them to kill one so pure and innocent. I knew that if I could win them over and get them worked up in a high emotional state and ready to revolt, I would be successful. Not to try to get off topic here, but the propaganda I've been seeing in the news lately, the powers that are using mesmerism propaganda to try to bring about the new age and a new world order, are definitely trying to get we the people in an emotional state and ready to revolt. They even had one taunting press release saying that they can't believe the Ukrainian people wouldn't fight back to get the Crimea land from Russia, a portion of land between Ukraine and Russia, Crimea, however you say it. So it's so funny, I pay attention to this stuff, and I was reading that press release, and I said, man, there are people who are trying to bait us all, and bait those people, and bring about World War III. And they're not above using the occult, and mesmerization, programming, mind control, drugs, and everything else against us. That's why I take the time and make these videos and talk. I don't think I'm wrong. Of course, I had to chance the kahuna having K-load. So apparently, if a kahuna thinks somebody's going to attack them spiritually, there's a cleansing process they can do. But the doctor here said, well, he probably didn't think anybody was going to catch him, so he probably didn't go through the cleansing ritual. But I thought that it improbable that he would have no fear that I would send back his death prayer. I doubted that if he'd ever heard of me over on that side of the island. I stood over the boy and began to advance arguments to the spirits. I was smoother than a politician. I praised them and told them what fine fellows they were, how deserving and clever. Little by little, I worked around to tell them how sad it was that they had been made slaves by the kahuna instead of being allowed to go on to the beautiful heaven that awaited. I explained just how they had been captured by the kahuna and imposed upon. I told them how pure and innocent and good the boy was, and how black and vile the kahuna was. She's talking to the spirits possessing the little boy. I still consider that argument a masterpiece. The Hawaiians blubbered from time to time as I described the pathetic condition of the spirits. Finally, I decided that I must have the spirits ready to pull the kahuna limb from limb. I was ready to give them the command to return and visit the kahuna with 10 times the punishment he had ordered for the boy. I could bull roar in those days with the best. I can yet. The doctor threw back his head and gave a roar that shook the house. Well, I gave my command in such a tone, I yelled so loudly that I frightened the pack animals. So it's all intention and will, and apparently these spiritual beings are from the lower self, if we have a higher self and a lower self, as I've gone over earlier in this video. And they are seriously subjective to influence. They're not the brightest spirits in the world, or they wouldn't be susceptible to being enslaved. They're like dumb animals, the lower spirit. The men drew back hurriedly, and the boy whimpered like a frightened child. It was a supreme effort, mentally, emotionally, and physically, with me. I put every particle of my will and concentration into that command. So that's why these people who join the Illuminati and all these secret societies and cults go through so many years of initiation. It takes focus. And if you watch the channeled material, well, I got distracted with a little phone call. But back to what I was talking about. If you watch channelers, channeling entities, you can see that there's a personality change and some emotions involved. They take over with authority. So what the different level of spirits are in these different cases is just interesting to investigate. So he put every particle of will and concentration into that command. When I repeated it 3 times, I sat down by the boy, trembling and dripping. I continued to keep my mind fastened like a vice on the project at hand, never letting it waver from my willed determination to see that the spirits obeyed my orders. So apparently we as humans have an incredible ability with our wills too. That's why some people are natural hypnotists. The light faded and the stars came out. The boy lay silently. From a safe distance, the men watched me with faces now expectant and now reflecting horrible fear of the unseen. At times, the air about us seemed to tremble with fury of some unearthly conflict of forces. The longest hour in history was about gone when I suddenly felt an odd sensation. It was as if the tension in the air had gone in a flash. I drew a deep breath. A few minutes later, there came a whisper from the boy, and he was crying, "Oh, my legs! I can feel my legs." I could have shouted in my triumph as I set to work to massage the twitching limbs, which seemed to react as if they had been frozen. So there's more here that I'm not going to read. I'll just jump to the last part. So the doctor wanted to find out what happened to the kahuna who sent the spirits with the death prayer. And so I underlined this information. Apparently, when he traveled to that village, the natives there and the children, when they saw him approaching with the boy, they screamed in terror and ran. But apparently the kahuna, their kahuna, had died. On the night that I sent back the death prayer to the kahuna, he had been asleep. He had awakened with a scream and rushed around to get tie leaves and began to fan himself to fight off his own spirits. Between gasps, he told the people what had happened. He had neglected to kala himself, to cleanse himself and protect himself. And the white kahuna had taken a low advantage of him. In a very short time, he had fallen to the ground and lay there groaning and frothing at the mouth. He was dead by morning. So there's a lot more here, a couple more pages, but I think I'll end this video. I'm going to make more videos from that book on Max Freedom's Long's investigation into the Huna, the religion, ancient religion of the Hawaiians, who apparently came by canoes, double canoes with a pole between, from the North Africa area, even of the area of the pyramids and the ancient Middle Easterners, place where the Anunnaki are supposed to have come from, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Sumerian tablets, Zechariah Stitchins, and so much more, the Nibiru lore, the place of Noah's Ark, the Great Flood, Moses, Jesus, the Middle East, Northern Africa. So anyways, way back then, before they went to Hawaii, the kahunas of the native North African tribe left their body and searched, or went around the world and found the islands and planned out the trip for 11 tribes of the people, the natives. And the same kahuna religious ceremonies that happen in Hawaii apparently still go on over there in North Africa, this particular tribe near the Middle East where the pyramids are. Interesting conversation. Just one more little bit to add to the bank of knowledge, trying to figure out what the heck's going on. What is the Kabbalah? What is the Talmud, the Zohar, mysticism? And are they using any of this stuff with evil forces against the rest of us? What about spirits, demons, angels, and all that stuff? Why do they want us not to believe in religion and to deny Jesus? And that's been a long-standing platform of the Freemasons and the other secret societies. They hate Christianity. Just an interesting conversation. Thank you for watching my video, Rick Miracle reporting.